Good morning. First of all, I just want to welcome you all um, and put your mind at ease. I think most of you are aware of this, but there are a few people for whom this might be unusual. But those sways that I'm doing that look so weird. Somebody asked me once, "What is the deal with those sways? What are you doing?" And it's not a big mystery. So when we're swaying, when we sit on these cushions, what we're looking for is that center of balance. So our sitting posture on the cushion, we call it upright sitting. We sit upright. We're not leaning one way. We're not leaning another way. So that way you don't have to sit there adjusting your posture on your cushion all the time. Because if you're leaning one way, then you got to keep adjusting yourself during the sitting meditation. So you're not leaning one way or the other, you're not leaning forward, you're not leaning back. And you're just feeling where that center is so that if you have to make a slight adjustment, which you saw me do after I swayed, you can do that. And then you've got that center of balance there. So that's all we're doing is we're just feeling, there it is. There it is. And there it is. Right. That's all we're doing. So in case you were wondering, that's what the sways are. And a lot of what we do in this practice is fairly practical like that. It might look weird because it's a tradition. It has particular forms to it. So it's not like everyone who's looking for their center of balance is going to start swaying. But this is the way that we do it here. So, and everyone who is here, so I look out at you, you are Sangha, which is a Buddhist term that means community. That's basically it. Everyone who's here right now is part of this Sangha. So somebody who's been here for a long time, like Mary Sullivan, who's been here before there was a here, right? So she was part of the group of people that went around looking for a place for Dharma Field to be located. She helped find this place. Or Mary Olympia, you've been coming for a long time too. Yeah. And Sangha is that. People who've been coming for a long time. And then we have people maybe not coming quite as long. Ryan, you've been coming for a few years, right? And Kristen, you've been about a year, you've been coming here. You have John, you've been coming for about the past month. Is that right? Sounds right? Yeah. So welcome. And then I don't know who you are, but hi. And if you want, you can come in. If you're comfortable being out there, that's fine. But you're part of our Sangha too. So the people who come in right now are part of this Sangha. Everybody, new and old, right? That Sangha who's coming together to do this. And Sangha is one of the three jewels of Buddhism, sometimes called the triple treasure or the three treasures of Buddhism. And those jewels are Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And Buddha, you might go, oh, I know who Buddha is. He's that fat Asian guy that's laughing in those statues. And I say that because before I came to Dharma, that's actually who I thought Buddha was. When I came here and then I learned that Buddha was actually Indian, I was surprised because I was like, oh, I always thought he was Chinese. But so Buddha is that historical figure that you might see in statue. But Buddha really just means awakened one who is awakened. So that's Buddha, one who is awakened to this reality. Dharma is one of those words in Sanskrit that if you look it up, it's like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an English word like this, but I have a Webster's Third International Dictionary. I don't really use it anymore because now the dictionaries we have are these little things, these little devices we have just look words up. But before that, I had this giant dictionary. It's the kind of thing you'd find in a library, just a big dictionary that really should have been on some kind of stand because it's got, it just weighs like 10, 15 pounds or something like that. And there'll be some words where the definition for the word fills up a whole column. Dharma is one of those words. It just has a lot of meanings to it. But in this context, Dharma is the teaching of the awakened. So Buddha, the awakened, Dharma, the teaching of the awakened, and Sangha is the community of people taking up this way, who are practicing this way. There's another way to see all of this, and I at least want to point this out to you, that Buddha, the one who's awakened, they've awakened to reality. Right? So what they're awakening to is the confusion that they usually have that there's a separate person that lives outside of reality. They're awakening to the fact that reality is them. Reality is all of us. That's what they're awakening to. So Buddha sometimes is used interchangeably just to refer to reality. Sometimes it's referred to as Buddha nature, but Buddha, so reality. Dharma, the teachings of the awakened, is also points to the teaching. First of all, the teachings of the awakened point right to reality. That's what they do. They point directly to reality. But Dharma also means the truth of reality. And then Sangha, this community of people with whom we're taking up this way, with whom we're practicing. If you really start to look at it, that's everything. If you're taking up this practice, if you're living a life that is following the teachings of Buddhism, and that's kind of an awkward way to put it, but if you're living a life that is the teaching of the awakened, that sort of follows the precepts, and that's what I'll be talking about in a moment, you'll realize all beings, everything, every person on the planet is practicing with you, whether they want to or not, and whether you want to practice with them or not. All things are. You probably experience that when you, I don't know, are at home, and I still remember this, we have a little bathroom thing that we put over our bathroom drain, and I was opening my toothpaste tube up, and the thing wasn't in the drain, and I just went, watch, I'm going to drop the cap down the drain, and sure enough, it slipped out of my finger, went rolling around the sink, and I'm reaching after it, and it went right down the drain, right? And there I am. Now what do I do? So I just put some aluminum over the top of I didn't have time to deal with it. I was on my way to work. But there you are. There's that thing, and it's just doing a thing you didn't want it to do. And now what are you going to do? You practice with it. You live that. That's what's happening right there, right? So if you look at all of these, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, they also are all just reality, living reality. So sometimes following the Buddha way, living the Buddha way, is referred to as taking refuge in the triple treasure. You may hear that, taking refuge in the triple treasure. So one thing I just want to quickly say about that taking refuge is not the normal way we think of that as like shelter, like a place to go in the middle of a storm where we're not going to get harmed. And by the way, we have one of those here in this building. We had a class once, and there was a thunderstorm going on. Oh, sirens are going off, and I went, I don't think we should be sitting here. So we went to our storm shelter, which is just the corridor down in front of the restrooms, just an area where you don't have windows, right? It's a place where you're safe from things falling on you. But that's not what taking refuge in the triple treasure is. What taking refuge in the triple treasure is to wholeheartedly take up this way, to do it with your whole being. That, what I just said, is a prologue to my talk. So I look at this and I go, well, I hope my talk's not going to be too long, because that was just a prologue. My talk is titled, Living Buddhism is Buddhism. And living Buddhism is Buddhism. Buddhism's not a philosophy. It's not something you think about, talk about. You can read about it and talk about it all you want, but that's really not what Buddhism is. Buddhism is living Buddhism. And the reason that I'm talking about this is, as I kind of dropped before, we have a precept ceremony coming up in April. On April 13th. And in that ceremony, we realize we vow to live a life of the precepts. And the precepts are taking refuge in the three treasures, and taking refuge in the three treasures means to live the three treasures. And I realized as I was preparing this talk that the precepts bring together the three treasures. That's what they do. They bring together Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. So, what are the precepts? Now, I'm talking to a bunch of people who probably have heard of what the precepts are before. You know, when we hear that word precept, if you've heard it before, and I know when I came here, it wasn't a word that was really rolling off my tongue very often, but if you've heard the word precept before, or you know that word, it probably means rules. You probably think of rules. And if you go to Merriam-Webster's dictionary, your go-to dictionary, when you're coming up with a definition, a general definition for a word, right? Merriam-Webster dictionary defines freedom as, right? So, but if you look up precepts, it's a command or principle intended especially as a general rule of action. A command or principle intended especially as a general rule of action. So that's what we think of when we think of precepts. Now, what's interesting is that if you look, I didn't even know this existed. This is at least on the online version of Merriam-Webster. If you scroll down a little bit past the definitions, they have a little area that if you're looking for synonyms, they'll give you some synonyms, but they'll tell you kind of the deeper meaning to the words, maybe the connotation of the words, so that you know if you're going to use a synonym, you might lose something in the translation, right? So they say about precept that it's commonly suggests something advisory and not obligatory, communicated typically through teaching. Now it starts to look to me a little bit like I told you, in Buddhism, we might think, or in our daily thinking, we might think of precepts as rules, but in Buddhism, we don't quite think of it that way. And it gets a little bit closer to what the precepts are in Buddhism with this something advisory and not obligatory. Because in the Buddha Dharma, in the teaching of the awakened, there are no rules. Now I say that, but if you know your Buddhism, you know that there's a whole book, we'll call it a book, of teachings called the Vinaya. And the Vinaya are rules. They're rules for how monks are supposed to live. And in fact, there are 227 rules for monks. 227 of them. How are you supposed to remember that? And there are 311 for women. So yes, Buddhism has that same problem that a lot of cultures and other systems have had. There's a problem there. So I think I talked to you that there's a woman who was, I believe it was in Laos, was the first woman to become an ordained nun. I think it was Laos. I can't remember exactly the country, but and she was first ordained in the 20th century, and she was first ordained in the latter half of the 20th century because women weren't seen as being acceptable vessels for the Buddha Dharma. And when she took it up, one of the things they were saying is 311 rules. How are you going to be able to follow all of those rules? And her answer was, well, I just follow one rule, which is I just watch my own mind. And you watch your own mind, the other 310 rules kind of follow along. But generally speaking, in the Buddha Dharma, so these Vinaya are to help monks live together. They're just rules to help people who are living close together, live close together and try to reduce the friction that might arise. But in the Buddha Dharma, our teachings really aren't about rules. They point instead to reality. They direct our attention to what is actually taking place. And that's what Buddhist precepts do. So they're not rules. They're more along the line of advisory, not obligatory rules. But even more so, they're just pay attention. This is what's happening right now. And if this is what's happening, this is what it means. That's really how the precepts work. So if you look at the two parts of the word precept, they help us understand how Buddhist precepts work. So the root word, that prefix is pre, and pre means before. And sept means to hold or grasp. So precept is before we hold or grasp. And I said that the Buddhist precepts point to what is actually taking place. They point to what is actually taking place because usually what we do, usually the way we move about the world, is we get an idea about what's taking place, and then we act and speak and think out of that idea of what's taking place. But the precepts now are showing us, before you take hold of an idea about what's taking place, See what this is. See what's actually taking place. So they help us to see when we've acted in a way that's coming from, we've either acted, spoken, or thought out of grasped ideas about what's taking place. And those grasped ideas, that's what we also call delusion. So our practice is, what we awaken to is to delusion. We awaken to realizing that we have grasped ideas. And let me tell you, this is pretty subtle. And I'm going to give you an example that burns my brain as I try to explain it. So it's probably going to burn your brain too, just to show you the subtlety of it, because it's pretty subtle. So what we do, though, is we can see when we're grasping ideas, when we're confused. And the reason it's subtle, of course, is as somebody once, it was Joko Beck's daughter, the great Zen teacher from the 20th century. Her daughter said to Joko Beck, you keep telling me that I have to see my confusion. How am I supposed to see that if I'm confused, right? That's a great question. But we can actually see the effects of our confusion, right? The way that we act will have some kind of impact in the world. Sometimes we come right up against it. The world suddenly doesn't make any sense. We come right up hard against our ideas about what the world is. And we go, whoa. Now, generally, we might think that's a blip. Or it might be something we remember 10 years down the road. They go, I still remember this feeling I had or this insight that I had. Weird, but then we go back to our usual way of constructing the world. So I thought I would share with you a precept so you could hear what they sound like. Many of you are familiar with these. A follower of the way does not possess anything selfishly. That's one of the precepts. And you might hear in there, oh, I'm not supposed to possess anything selfishly. But if you actually listen to how it's worded, a follower of the way does not possess anything selfishly. It's not telling you to do something, right? That's only describing something. It's not even judging. So I know we've been reading the Dhammapada for far too long on Wednesday nights here at Dharma Field. And in the Dhammapada, they might say something like, somebody who possesses something selfishly is evil. One who does not possess something selfishly is good, right? That's not in the precepts, right? We don't see that kind of language. It's just a description. Then there's a teaching that goes along with the precept. And here's the teaching that goes along. This is Bodhidharma's teachings of the precepts. Here's the one that goes along with the precept I just read, which is the 9th precept out of 10. He says, self-nature is clear and obvious. Within the suchness of all-pervading Dharma, not clinging to a single form is called the precept of not being avaricious. And you hear that and it might sound like religious talk. I don't know, but it might not mean anything to you. I remember talking to somebody about that there's something about when one reads a text that comes from particularly religious traditions, that when you read it on the page, it just doesn't make any sense at all. And I remember that when I was, I don't know, realizing that there was spiritual wisdom that I was definitely lacking from my life. I was reading a lot of literature and some of it was arising in that. And I remember I thought, I'll just read some passages from the Bible. And how hard can it be? I'm a fan of Elizabethan and Jacobean English literature. I mean, Shakespeare, but all the playwrights kind of around the same time that Shakespeare was writing, and poets of that era. So I love that language. And so I thought, I'll get the King James Bible, the King James translation of the Bible, and I'll read that. And I read it and it didn't make any sense to me. It was like I recognized the words, but I had no idea what they meant. It was like, what on earth? And then when I get something like that, then I just read it real fast because I make myself read it. I'll be like, well, I'm going to read the book of Job come hell or high water. And here we go. And there was just a lot of the book of Job that did not make any sense to me whatsoever. I finally signed a book out of the library to help me understand what I was reading. Anyhow, so this might sound like that to you. Self-nature is clear and obvious within the suchness of all pervading Dharma, not clinging to a single form is called the precept of blah, 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 blah. Right, and you go right past it. So I'll just unpack it real quick. I'm not going to we're going to have a class, a discussion group on these precepts coming up soon. So the way this works, though, that first line, self-nature is clear and obvious, it is going to repeat that. Those teachings are always going to say that. And you know why? Because it is clear and obvious. It's just right here. This is reality. Self-nature they're talking about is reality. It's right here. Now, what happens is we get caught up in ideas, and it's as if it's not here at all, or as if it's hidden behind a cloud of smoke. But it's right here. If we could just let go of all the cogitations we're doing that hides it from us, it's really not hiding. It's just right here. So it just keeps reminding us, self-nature is clear and obvious. Reality is clear and obvious. If it's not, just look, because it's right here, clear and obvious. Within the suchness of all pervading Dharma, and suchness is just what's taking place right now. Just what's taking place right now, that's suchness. Within the suchness, now this particular line, the second line of these things, usually is telling us some quality of the truth of reality. So there's that word Dharma in there, that this precept is pointing directly to. And in this case, it's all pervading. So the truth of reality is all pervading. It's all pervading. It's everywhere. You can't get outside of it. It's all pervading, right? So what that means is that it's not like a group of people have it. A group of people don't have the truth. They don't have it. It's just not how it works. That's not how the truth of reality works. And it also might suggest that there's a place you could go that has the truth of reality. That's not how it works. It's all pervading, right? It's everywhere, right? It's not impeded at all. So then it goes on to say, not clinging to a single form. Now you can see if you cling to a single form, in a manner of speaking, you're impeding the flow of Dharma. You're really not, because it's everywhere, even in your confusion. Dharma is showing up, right? But when you're clinging to a single form, you're losing track of it. You're losing track of the fact that self-nature is clear and obvious. It's right here. It's right. It really is right here. So not clinging to a single form is called the precept of not being avaricious, of not being greedy, right? Of thinking, oh, I got the truth right here. You can't have it. I'll let you have a piece of it. Here it is. I'll pick it. It's not a closed hand teaching, the Buddha Dharma, right? It's open hand. We talk about opening the hand of thought, but it's also open-handed teaching. We don't hide anything in here and go, guess what's in here? I know. And I'm going to tell you what's in there. That's what's in there. Instead, we show. It's always open-handed teaching. So we don't cling to anything in particular. And then if we participate in the precept ceremony, so these are the precepts then. They're just these teachings that help remind us what we're doing, what it is that's taking place. So if we find that we believe we've gotten hold of the truth, or we believe that that person has the truth and that person doesn't have the truth, that the truth is over there, but it's not over here, we can see that we've just lost track of how reality is actually showing up. We've just lost track of it. So all we do then, we don't have to tell ourselves, oh, I'm wrong, or I'm a bad person. You just bring your attention back to this. It might still seem that way. Just keep looking. As long as that's the way you're understanding it, just know that's not how truth operates. So when we participate in the precept ceremony, now we're vowing to live a life of the precepts. So I just want to quickly talk about that word vow, because when we think of vow, we think of a promise that we're making about something that we're not doing right now that we're going to do. And in Buddhism, what vow is, and it's going to sound like a broken record, but vow isn't that. Because vow is, or Buddhism is, Buddha Dharma is pointing to what's taking place right now. So when we talk about vow, it's not about something that you're not doing right now that you're going to be doing. So you take a vow to follow these precepts. Now, flesh this out in a second. But the sense we have, that vow is a promise to do something we're not doing right now, is interesting. This is where I want to get to the subtlety. I asked myself if I was going to include this in a talk, because it is going to make your brain steam when I start talking about this, as you try to follow what I'm talking about. But that sense that we need to vow to do something we're not doing right now is rooted in the realization that we sense that something's not right. We feel that something's not right, so we're going to vow to do what we think might be the right thing. So what we're doing is if you really start to look at that carefully, what we're telling ourselves is that right now, it can't be this way. It can't be this way. There must be some other way that's the right way. But the way that we're sensing there must be some other way from is that there must be some other way from what it is that's taking place right now. That's where it starts to get smoky. In other words, we have a sense something's not right here. But that sense we have that something's not right here is the sense that there's something not right here. That's the sense we have that there's something not right here. So then what we do is we think, well, there's something that I have to do that's not here to take care of what's not right here. But what we're losing track of right there, that's how confusion works. So you go, something's not right here. I got to do something. I have to vow to do something. There's something that I have to do that's not taking place right now. Or there's something that should be here right now that's not here right now. And so I got to do that thing to bring that about here right now. That's still that confusion of thinking that there's something that needs to be here that's not here right now. And we get caught up in that. And that's actually our sense that belief that it could be different is what's wrong. That's what's off. But instead, what we do is we put it on reality because usually we grab hold of our ideas so quickly that we lose track of it. In other words, we're caught up in our confusion. It's what Joko Beck's daughter was asking. If I'm caught up in confusion, how can I see it? So if you see the subtlety of what I was talking about, you can see how, I don't know how you can think your way out of it. You know, I can give you a slightly less involved way of understanding this. So we notice that something is off, okay? In the world, maybe even in our understanding of the world, we might feel inadequate. We might feel alone. We might feel depressed. We can see others suffering. Maybe we package that as that person's angry. There's an interesting movie out right now in the movie theaters. Well, showing one showing a day. So if you want to see this, you really have to make a commitment to see this. It's a British film, a really great filmmaker. It's called Hard Truths. So now you know why it's only showing one showing a day. Who's going to go see a movie called Hard Truths? And the main character is so angry. She is so angry that at times it's hilarious. Because you just go, I can't believe this woman saying it. She's complaining about a baby in the neighborhood, you know. Oh, and then they put a big bonnet in her hair to show off the fact that it's a baby, you know. Oh, and the baby's got a little clothing that has pockets in it. What does a baby need pockets in their clothes for? What are they going to do? Keep a knife in there? Maybe like it gets funny. She's really angry. And then as you continue watching the film, you realize it comes from great pain. You don't know what it is, but you know there's great pain there. So that's suffering. It might look to us like that. There's angry people. They got their edges out. Their knives are out. And we back away. Maybe we get angry back with them. And we see people who are crazy or people who are suffering just in pain or poverty, right? So again, I'm just giving you this sense about how this is. Then we think we should do something about that, or we feel we should do something about that, and if we don't, we might feel bad about it. That's what I'm talking about. Now, does that mean we don't do anything about it? I'm not saying that. So people hear that and they go, oh my God, he's saying we're not supposed to do anything about people who are suffering. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is when we look at what's going on, then we feel we should be doing something because this should be different than it is right now. Do you hear that? That's baked right into that. This should be different than it is right now. But here it is. I dropped that toothpaste cap down the drain, and then it wasn't supposed to happen. This isn't the way it's supposed to be happening, right? But there it is. That's what's happening right there at that moment, right? So our vow then isn't to vow to do something different because this is untenable. Our vow instead is a commitment to this. It's a commitment to living this moment, whatever that might look like. So our vow then is to commit to this moment, to see what's actually taking place now. And how our sense of what's going on, that sense we have that tells us something's not quite right, that's just a notion we have. And we want to notice if that notion's arising, that notion is arising. Otherwise, you get caught up in that thing I was telling you about that's so hard for us to see. That vow is to do something different. But that's because we feel like this is off and this should be different than it is. But what's we want to be different is the fact that we think this should be different. You know what I mean? Then we're caught up in that. So our vow is to actually see that we're caught up in our ideas. It's not that our ideas are wrong. It's not, none of this is about good or bad. All this is just about seeing what's actually taking place. No judgment, just like the precepts. I mean, that's what this is. This is living the life of the precepts. So it's just awareness. That is truth. That's undisputable truth. There's truth where we can say, this person's right, this person's wrong. In the relative world, we can say that. This is true, that's not true. This is the truth that's indisputable. What is that? It's experience. That's all it is. You can't deny your experience unless you start to explain what that experience is. Once you start to get a notion of what that experience is, well, yeah, then you can get that wrong. Because that's the way that stuff is, right and wrong, but just experience itself. That's truth, that's Dharma. To realize that is to be awakened, that's Buddha. And that's to see that all beings are Buddha. That's Sangha. And that's the precepts. That's living the three treasures. So that's what our precept ceremony is about, that vow, that commitment to live in that awareness. And again, that ceremony is on April 13th. And the reason I bring it up today is that starting February 26th, if you think you might be interested in participating in the precept ceremony, and that includes both people here at Dharma Field and those of you on Zoom, contact me so we can just talk about your participating in it. But there is a discussion group that you are asked to be a part of. I say required after I just got done saying all of this. That doesn't sound right, but really you should take this. It's a discussion group. It's on Wednesday nights. It'll be at 7:45. And we'll be talking about the precepts. That's what we'll be talking about. What I ask that you do is you actually take an audio class version of our precept class. So you're taking a precept class, and then this discussion group is going to open up, what it is that you encountered in the class. So that's starting again February 26th. And I really do encourage people to participate. Now, that Wednesday night group is open to the public. So if you've already done the precepts and you're like, well, I'd still like to go to the Wednesday night group, just don't go to the Wednesday night group. If you've never taken the precepts and you have no intention on taking the precepts, I guarantee you that the teachings of the precepts are so rich that just being part of those conversations is worthwhile. So I encourage you to attend that discussion group if you can, if it's something you do. Again, Wednesday evenings, 7:45. Okay, that's all I had to say. Kind of a big, long infomercial for the precept ceremony. Any questions or comments?